Bam.
Hey, everybody, I'm Jeremy McKane, and you're watching the Break It Down show.
We break it down over here. You know how
Breaking it down. That's how we do.
You do cool stuff, and I always love having you on the show. I'm so thankful for Sandra for introducing us. And when I get down on who we are as humans, I think about the humans that are out there, like Terrence Long. Oh my God, like the work that he's doing.
Yeah, amazing.
And you see these continued conversations as we struggle with the left and right. I just wrote a whole thing today in a listserv that I'm in on email about the California water wars and how like we are such dicks that we can't get along good enough to figure out what the best solution is. So instead, you get a Owens Lake has what has to be multi-billion-dollar temporary sprinkler system to try to keep the dust bowl from being a dust bowl. Like that is not the outcome anybody wants, right?
Yeah.
And so you know, environmentalists, and God bless environmentalists, we need these guys. But we have this thing where like this is not helping the environment, having this atrocity out there and this money suck. You know, we have to have farms. You know, we have all these things we have to balance. And part of, hey, what up, Dickie? And part of what we battle with are these competing narratives. The whole, hey, there's super important rocks on the bottom of the ocean. We just pick them up. I mean,
yeah, why not?
Just turn them into something.
That's what nature's for us just to take whatever's there. Sure, it's ours.
So yeah, man, how do we? When you look at this, first off, talk about the impossible problem you guys are trying to solve. When we look at these impossible problems and all the disparate conversations that have to happen, some things that are trade-offs always, you know, like in the water wars. Yes, I get it. Some small farmers and some of them may have an ethnicity that's non-white, and some of them may suffer. That may be a case, but you can't lift the entire thing at one time simultaneously without there being a significant amount of pain along the way.
Yeah, I think that the general synopsis of humans is, you know, when we recognize that there's a problem, we want a silver bullet. We want this one thing that just makes it go away. You know, oh, you're depressed? Take a pill. You'll be fine. Don't worry about dealing with your issues. There's medicine for that. You know, it just doesn't work that way. You know, as much as I would really love to have a silver bullet in the back pocket of mine, believe me, I would have used it by now. And I think so would so many other people, because I think it's fundamentally we all need the same things. You know, we need a roof over our head. We need a place to sleep. We need family. We need to eat, you know, and when some of those basic necessities are ripped away from us, things get a little crazy.
A lot of people like to make other people's business their business. You know, like you're too damn busy to make anybody else's business your business, you know? But
are you talking about my in-laws again?
Probably.
No.
We're all guilty of it. We all take on things we need to take on.
Yeah.
But sometimes we take on things we don't need to take on, and they're often what somebody else should do. How do we deal with that? How do we get people, like, if you, instead of fighting me, if we could just find the areas where we agreed and worked on that, boy, we'd get a lot more done.
Well, I mean, I think the best way to look at it is, you know, my dad used to always tell me that people were like tools in a toolbox. You know, you could take a hammer out, try to get a screw to go into the wall. It might work with a little bit of force. You're just going to be there all day and you're going to be cussing yourself the whole time. But you know what? Some people are screwdrivers. Some people are hammers. Some people are saws, you know, bring those people out for the right project, you know? And I think, you know, you might not always see eye to eye, but, you know, it goes back to what I just said a minute ago. Like, we all have these basic necessities. We all want the same thing. Nobody says, oh, you know what? I don't want to be prosperous. No, it's not for me. No, I'd rather just be poor. I would like to decide which child I could feed today. You know, nobody says that. You know, we're presented with those out of a number of different challenges. So I think, you know, the first thing is compassion. I think we need to be compassionate to one another, realize that we don't know everything. And there are other people that, even though that they might be on the political opposites as us, they might have some insight that could be useful to us, and vice versa. And I think, you know, that's kind of a tall order. You know, here I am talking about, you know, essentially like, well, let's just have world peace. Like, yeah, great. You know, conflict has been a construct of the human makeup for millennia. And so just assuming that that's going to go away tomorrow is not possible. But what we do have is we do have technologies that allow us to connect in ways that we've never connected before. And to date, we haven't used those technologies very efficiently. The real question is can we learn how to use those technologies and kind of cover over some of our differences? I mean, that's the $1 million question. I don't know if I have the answer to that.
Yeah. So you helped me get, so there's, for the audience, there's a guy named Jacques Cousteau who's been passed away, but he's an innovator in underwater exploration and discovery. And he's got a whole legacy of people in his life. So the Cousteau family is decades into looking into the ocean. And when we were talking, what's his first name? Fabian. When Fabian was on the show, we talked about our still emerging ability to stay underwater long enough to be part of an environment to even study it. And here we are wanting to change it. Again, back to let's just pick up these bowling balls off the bottom of the ocean. And he's saying, hey, man, this is a Cousteau saying, hey, man, wait a minute. We got to understand this environment better. Every time I go down, I find things I had no idea existed.
Of course.
Changes my worldview on these things. So, okay. Does that apply to space, do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I think
bring it on.
Yeah, I think there's so many things. I mean, I think, it's funny because, I've had some discussions with people and they're like, well, what good has space gotten us? Like, what? I'm like, hello, have you used the GPS in your car lately? Have you used Velcro? Like, I mean, there's all kinds of things that kind of came out of the space race and I think what will continue to come out of the commercial space industry. Somebody recently asked me, why did we have an astronaut on Necker Island the other day? Because we're talking about the ocean and the work that's being done with the ocean. It's like, hello, people, are you not thinking? Like, this is one gigantic bubble of water. And when you are an astronaut and you see that this world is really planet ocean, it really makes you want to do more. Never mind the fact that the astronaut that we had was Dr. Sian Proctor. She'd spent like months at sea with NOAA, and she's got an in-depth, pun intended, knowledge of the ocean. But sometimes, it's kind of hard to see the forest through the trees, when people are really trying to kind of like make sense of something. And I think that's where space really comes in, is because, for those few 600 people or so who've ever, left the 200-mile border, what is considered space, they experience the overview effect, right? You don't see borders, you don't see national pride, you don't see races, you see one spaceship. Use one spaceship Earth, and you realize how delicate all of those resources are. I mean, we're using the James Webb Space Telescope to look into our past. We're doing all these things to try to find water and other Earth-like planets. Guess what? We're sitting on one right now. So, and I fully subscribe to what Elon Musk says. 99% of our resources on this planet, our money resources, should be applied to this planet and making this planet habitable in a place that we want to live. But 1% easily should be spent on space exploration and trying to figure out how to become an interplanetary species.
Yeah. A lot in that. When we look back at space again, should we be yanking space rocks back to the Earth? Because there they are. I mean, how is that different than the bottom of the ocean?
I mean, it's not. I mean, if you mentioned Fabian Cousteau, you might as well be, you might as well be at the, on the moon if you're, underneath the water. Because whenever you find some kind of scenario where, you're in trouble, you can't just go to the surface because you've saturated yourself. So there's a process that you have to go through, and so you have whatever major issues happen down on the seafloor, it has to be handled on the seafloor.
Yeah. And then going back to the whole idea of how much we spend on space exploration and what we do and the overview effect, all of that stuff, it's so dense with thoughts and philosophy and ideas and approaches. The overview effect seems to be a universal thing that happens to all these folks that get far enough away.
Right.
And the things I love to say is we're taught, talking about, like things that like perspective change things. We're taught that nature hates a vacuum. That's bullshit. Because the majority of existence is a vacuum.
That's right.
Yeah. So we have this really precious thing that is absolutely abnormal.
Right.
And I'm not saying, Democrats, Republicans, just like you. I'm just saying,
Yeah.
we need good stewards of this
People.
resource.
People.
Yeah.
Crew members of Spaceship Earth. That's it.
Yeah. We're all on this thing. You've taught me like that ocean is just a big bathtub. And if you pee in it, there's going to be pee in the bathtub.
Yeah, exactly. It's really funny because, when you look at statistics, you'll hear this one a lot. Let's say 71% of the Earth's surface is the ocean, right? You think, well, gosh, that's a lot. That's, it makes you start to feel really inferior, which, let's say we are anyway. But if we were to, there was a Sandor Molsow who used to be the chief scientist for the International Seabed Authority. He said to me, he's like, if you took if we said, let's just put it into perspective. If you took a tennis ball and said, that's the Earth, then you take an eraser head off the end of a pencil and you spread it out and smooth it around that tennis ball, that would be the Earth. I mean, that would be the water around the Earth. So it might be 71% of the surface, but there is more Earth than there is of the water. That water is such a finite amount, not just here on the planet, but also in our present solar system, in our universe. And so when we think about, the damage that we're doing, I mean, to us, because we're so tiny, it looks like we could, piss in the ocean. I mean, I used to hear that growing up. Piss in the ocean. It's not going to make a difference. Well, it does make a difference, actually. And now that we know that, I think that we're the first humans that ever walk the surface of this planet to say, well, now we're at least aware of what our impact is. The question is, will we do something about it?
As we kind of describe this whole thing, I want to bring Terrence Long back into the conversation because what he taught me was, so we piss in the ocean. We dump our bombs and our munitions in the ocean. We have species of fish that are literally born with cancer because that's how they've adapted to their environment. And then what the world did as an agency, they just said anything before 1971 doesn't exist, except for it does. And there's all kinds of munitions. And then on the military side, we know this too, that certain places that the military does their training, their building, whatever it is, become contaminated. So much so that the military will say, oh, you were assigned at base X, automatic discomposition for, exposure to things. We didn't know. Right. They lose, where they do in the nuclear, biological, chemical weapons school, they've lost ranges. They're like, there used to be ranges over there. There's not even paperwork for it anymore. Right. And so, so the ocean's so different. We've dumped a lot of stuff into the ocean and poisoned it. Some of this, look, and I'm all for progress. I'm all for like trying to balance conservation, preservation and actual utilization, but we're not doing a good job of that.
I think a lot of it is that we kind of silo off, and we say, hey, Pete, you do your thing. I'm going to do my thing over here. And what are you doing over there? Oh, I'm doing this project to whatever, and I'm doing my thing. And it's just, there's a lot of whatever, and there's a lot of assumptions in a lot of these conversations. And I think that, the right hand often just doesn't know what the left hand is doing. The question I get a lot is like, well, why do we have all these weapons in the ocean to begin with? It's like, well, when we're at war, which, it reminds me of that song, what is it good for? Absolutely nothing. Right. We're building up all this stuff and the war's over. What are you going to do with it? You're not going to make like little trinkets and make necklaces out of it. No, you got to get rid of it somewhere. And unfortunately, up until the mid 90s, it was the ocean, and that stuff is still sitting there, constantly eroding. So it really kind of goes back to the fact that we have the wherewithal. We know what we can do to do something about it. The question is, can we get the funds to do it? And the interesting thing is that we have this disconnect with nature. And that in itself is its problem, because it never used to be that way. But we somehow made a business out of disconnecting ourselves from nature. The idea, I think, really kind of stems from the fact of like, well, how do we make money? Okay, so we dump the weapons in the ocean. We got to remove them. How much does it cost? Oh, it's going to cost X amount of $1 million. Yeah, what am I going to get out of it? Well, you're going to get a healthy lifestyle, but how do you quantify that in the form of ROI? So that's kind of the challenge that I see, and I'm really working hard to kind of create a narrative that shows what a healthy ecosystem is worth, and that's the work that we're doing at the Ocean Currency Network. Utilizing drones and other systems to be able to say, hey, your buying power increases the healthier the ecosystem is, because the things that are inside the ecosystems are the things that you would eat and you would sell in the future. But now we're getting to a point in time where, the tragedy of the commons, which is like, Pete, you go fishing and I go fishing. I get some fish, you get some fish. We never know how many fish is in the pond, but we just keep extracting until one day both of us are out there till wee hours in the morning, not catching anything because we never paid attention to allowing that ecosystem to rebound. So we want to use technology to help tell that story, because so much just goes untold and we continue to do these things siloed off. And I think, to answer all of your questions that have kind of really led up to this is really what the issue is. The issue is that we think that we can operate independently of each other, but I challenge that reasoning. Try doing that in the Navy. You think that the Navy is going to allow all the soldiers on a Tarawa class aircraft carrier to just do whatever they think is great? No. There has to be law and order. There has to be a system of organization. Otherwise, there's a mutiny. And I think that's really what we're talking about. When we talk about the ecological disasters of our planet, we're talking about the political separations of, just far left, far right. It's 100%. It's 100% a mutiny, and it's because there's lack of real direction and organization.
Let's take the when you build a bunch of weapons and then you can't use them. What do you do with them? Well, some banana head dude decides that he's going to insert himself into a Ukrainian-Russian conflict because, well, why not? If just as a for example, let's just say that the U.S. does insert itself there and they buy land or they lease land for 30 years. We will absolutely put 5 yards of rock deep on that thing, on that formerly healthy farmland to survive on it. We'll dump fuel everywhere, not on purpose, but just because you have so much fuel, you're going to dump fuel everywhere. We'll absolutely get rid of surplus weapons in form of shooting them at other humans, and we'll absolutely contaminate what was once a very beautiful and rich farm landed country. And to what effect? That Russia gets it, that Ukraine gets it, that we're there for 50 years. It's dumb. It's a dumb way to use your resources. I understand that we need to have enough potential to prevent someone from thinking they could win, but the reality is that we're also destroying our planet and putting our money into things that destroy our planet when we do that. I don't know.
I mean, what do you win? What do you win when you win a war?
Nothing.
I mean, some could argue that war is good for the economy. I've heard that before. And in many cases, I guess technically it could. I mean, not to get too, controversial here, but technically the war between North and South Korea hasn't ever ended. And a lot of that has to do with the US's involvement. There's a lot of money in keeping those two countries apart. But really, what is the real cost? What is the real cost from an environmental standpoint? Yeah. What's the real cost, the social dynamic? It just, it's a lot of half thinking and not a whole thinking, and that's really, I think, that at the base of the issue, but here I feel like we've gone way off topic here, but I feel like, but this is, when we look at the environmental issues, you can tie a lot of these things back down to racism, systemic racism. There's all kinds of things that you can go through over the course of time. And, great. Now that we know, what do we do to change it? Is there something that we can do to change? What would that be? And are you willing to stick your neck out there and be the first group of people to do it? Sometimes, people say, well, that's impossible. But, as Richard Branson once said, it's impossible until the first person does it. And then all of a sudden, everybody wants on board.
Yeah. I mean, flight was literally impossible.
Right.
And a couple of dudes made some bikes, twisted a box, and went, I think we can do this, Yeah. And I'm not trying to simplify it. I'm not saying that this problem isn't more impossible than that. But we also have more tools now. I want to get into really briefly, and then we'll transition to some other stuff. But I want to get into the cryptocurrency aspect of what you're doing, because people struggle with, like, how does it do it? Is it a store of value? Even saying those words are more than some people understand.
Of course. Yeah.
But the exchange of value, I think, is a fascinating way to look at this, where you can, encode your revenue or your exchange of value so that it does account for other things that have value. And I always use the example of, if you're a mother raising kids, we do not value that externally, and yet we know it has value. We know that when a couple, when the husband traditionally takes on a breadwinning role, and then if something happens and they break up, it's like, well, you just raise the kids. No, like this is a 6-figure a year job easily to do all this.
100%.
Oh my God, constant learning,
Yeah.
But we don't value it like that.
No, it's true. Well, I think in the terms of cryptocurrency, I think it's really important that we actually separate it into two separate things. One, I would say over here, blockchain technology, and blockchain technology is the basis of cryptocurrency. Cryptocurrency operates on top of that. And so, obviously everyone knows about Bitcoin. Bitcoin is the first, as Satoshi Nakamoto, the individual or group of individuals, whatever camp you subscribe to, as the paper states, it is the Bitcoin experiment. It's an experiment on so many different levels. On how could we have a global currency, but how could we have something that's transparent? That then in turn turned into a bunch of different things. And I think with most technological advances, they kind of morph and change into different things. And so, now we're looking at a plethora of different currencies. But you bring up the store of value as a question. How is it a store of value? Is it a store of value? I mean, it's so funny. Perception is such a great thing, right? Because what I deem valuable, you probably don't deem valuable. For all I know, you think Pokemon cards are valuable, and I think that they're worth nothing. You probably think that, I don't know what you think, right? But one man's trash is another man's treasure, and sometimes we find companionship in the trash that we love together. And I think that goes across the gamut from baseball cards to anything that one would collect. But I think when we talk about something like Bitcoin, which is a really basic thing that we could actually talk about now, how is it a store of value? Well, let's look at it like an investment, right? Let's from an investment as if it was a company, not as if it was a currency. Right. And if we had 22 million tokens that could ever be minted, right? That's 22 million. And all of a sudden I put in $11 million and you put in $11 million. Together, we'd have $22 million as a market cap. That's what the pool is. There's a pool of 22 million divided by 22 million tokens, which means what? Every token at that point is worth $1. Right. But all of a sudden, somebody else comes in, puts another 22 million, and now every token's worth $2, and so on and so forth. So what is the value of a Bitcoin? It's simple. It's the market cap divided by the total number of tokens that are actually minted. People can get philosophical and all that, but from a mathematical standpoint, that's what it is, right? Cool. So you're like, okay, cool. So I know that if I have a company and I've got $22 million worth of investment and I've got 22 million shares, then I've got each share's worth $1. And that's just really the best way to look at this technology. Now, the other thing that comes up a lot, especially I think I saw something flash in the comments here a minute ago about the environmental impact. When you do something with an experiment, I mean, you don't think about the most economical way to do an experiment. You just see if you can do it. Yeah. And that's what Bitcoin is. Bitcoin is an experiment that has gone rogue. Don't believe me? Go read the white paper. It's called the Bitcoin experiment. But what have we learned about this technology since that time? Well, we've learned that, there could be some value and having a system that is an open system that everyone has a copy of the ledger, right? That could be of value, right? Could be different things. It doesn't have to be money that's attached to it, which is why I separate crypto from blockchain. So that could be interesting. One of the reasons why I thought it would be interesting is that if I can actually store oceanic data in the form of NFTs, we started this in 2017, then I could actually have a record over a period of time that is on hundreds of thousands of machines globally recorded forever of what the temperature was or what the salinity was of a particular location over a period of time. It's almost like a core sample. Like you go down to Antarctica and you draw the core sample and you see what the Earth has done for thousands of years. This is kind of the digital version of that. And that's why I think that there's some value in this. I think that it's valuable because there are some cases where certain corrupt individuals would say, hey, let's just delete everything. Let's delete all the evidence, right? But it's really hard to do that in the blockchain world because you'd actually have to go back and physically delete all of these nodes around the internet. So it establishes an amount of trust. And so when we look at blockchain, really what we're talking about is a network of truth and transparency that is so needed in the world. You're removing humans from being those individuals that tell you what something is or is not. So that's when it starts to get into the kind of philosophical side of things. But I think from a value standpoint, we all determine what value is. I mean, the U.S. dollar, right? I mean, it used to be backed by gold, but it's not anymore. It's actually based on the faith and credit of the United States government. So be that as it may, I don't know what that means for you, and I don't know always what it means for me, but there is some value that's attached to that U.S. dollar. I think, was it Warren Buffett said, a person who just leaves his money in his savings account is an individual who has invested in the U.S. dollar, an asset that has proven to decrease over time. So, I don't look at these things necessarily as investment vehicles. What I look at them for is a way to kind of, get the story across a little bit differently and then better understand. Because again, at the very beginning of this interview, we talked about how people are siloed off and they're doing their own things. Well, that happens because we don't know how to communicate with the data that we have. Well, what if we had a tool that opened it up for everybody, and we were able to give credit to the individuals who are actually, contributing to these data sets? That's really what we want to try to do at the Ocean Currency Network. And that's been the challenge, is trying to figure out to get how do we get everybody to play together in the sandbox with their toys and share their toys, and incentivize them for doing so.
That sounds like an impossible problem.
It is an impossible problem, but I think we're making some progress because, the problem used to be, oh, hey, would you be willing to play with us? And the answer was always yes, until we asked for free stuff. Right. But free doesn't put food on the table. And they're like, well, we spent $1 million getting this data and you want it for free? Like this, how do we do this? And so now trying to figure out how do you monetize things that typically weren't monetized, that seems to be the key. And it goes back to the fact that every person on this planet understands the value of their purchasing power. And if I can convey to them that what they're contributing to has value and that they're going to get paid for it, then they're more likely to play with us.
One of the things that we struggle to value too is when someone puts forth some kind of charitable effort, whether it's a 501c3 or whatever, they're like, this is a problem, I'm going to dedicate my time to it. That's in my charitable effort. Right. We tend to not trust that. Like there's some kind of larger profit motive. I've got some friends that belong to a group of people that work on cold cases. They're called the case breakers. So these people put hours and hours and hours and hours of work into trying to solve these unsolvable cases. Jimmy Hoffa, they believe they've solved the Zodiac killer. They do cool. They do things that look. The FBI.
I bet they're great to have over for drinks.
Oh yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. And people lose their minds because they're like, "You've not solved it." Like, well, first off, understand that they're putting thousands of hours into something that the FBI can't, because it's not valuable to solve a 70-year-old murder or the Black Delilah. All these things, they're just not easily solvable, and the force only has so much work that it can put towards something, and that diminishes over time. So what they've done is they've said, hey, if you are interested in this, they're kind of crowdsourcing what they do now, and saying, these are the places, these are the research bits, help us do it now, whatever it is. And so there is a model for this that we're starting to understand. And so we have to try to build up that trust quotient so that we understand that, like in my case, I work for Save the Brave, and we try to stop veteran suicide. Where it's impossible. You're not going to stop veteran suicide. However, we can get a little better at recognizing it and saving the folks, like we encounter more reliably. Not 100%, but that's sort of the thing we're talking about here, right? Like we all want the ocean to be healthier. None of us want to eat plastic fish.
Right.
But,
but what does that mean?
Yeah.
Like of what value is that? Like, I mean, if you tell somebody like, I want a healthy ocean, like go on vacation, you don't want to see a bunch of trash in the ocean, but it's kind of like saying, I'd like a Lamborghini. Yeah. You're not telling me how expensive the Lamborghini is, nor what it's going to get me, Yeah. Actually, I think it's really funny. The old VW commercials were that the VW bus could pick up 8 times more women than the Lamborghini. So at least in that scenario, VW did a good job explaining, what you would get out of buying a VW bus. That's right. I think that's really where we have a trouble is the storytelling aspect of it, and it's like, You know, if you tell me, oh yeah, you're going to have a healthier ecosystem if we do X, Y, and Z, like I'm going to be on board because that's what I think about. But for a guy who's trying to make sure that his payroll is being, paid for, and he's not going to miss, and there's some real hard decisions he's got to make financially, like that's the least that he's worried about. And even more so when we talk about poverty.
Yeah, right. Poverty, Jesus. It's like the fresh water in people's lives problem. Like you're in a developed nation, and you're like, hey, we can deliver you fresh water, and then here comes this Scottish guy that I met in Afghanistan. I'm like, great, what are you gonna do with all the black water? Like, I don't know. I hadn't even thought about that. So like you've a surface level problem that you maybe have solved. Let's not even include the fact that you might cause tribal strife because you brought in a resource without accounting for the value of it overall.
Yeah.
These things get really complex, man. They get super complex and can cause problems. And then we solve this problem today. Like I've been talking about the water wars in California with some friends, right? And we're solving the problem that they have right now in 1852, and then in 1883. And then you just solve the next problem, and you end up with this Frankenstein system of temporary solutions that became.
Well, you're chasing symptoms. You're not going after the root cause.
Right.
Which, I think that's it's human nature. It's like, that's just what we do, and I think, we're asking for these massive systemic changes. And I think before we get too hot and heavy on what needs to change, we need to really say what the value would be if we did change, going back to munitions, one of the things that we did there is we said, most people don't realize that the TNT that's leaking into the ocean is causing cancer in humans. Dr. Jim Porter was the first one to actually do this research in Vieques, Puerto Rico, and found that there was no industry of any kind. There was no, things that you would normally have that would be, carcinogens. Well, what was it? Why were there so many people with cancer on an island where there isn't even a hospital? And it turns out that, we have dumped just enormous amounts of ordinances in this area, and people are getting sick. And so when you start to realize that, these actions that we thought were innocuous have real world consequences, then we start trying to figure out, okay, well, what are we going to do? No, hold on a second. I think my AirPod, one of my AirPods died. I'm doing the shuffle back and forth just to make sure that I still have my stuff. Let me just make sure that my audio is back. So sorry about that. But yeah, I think these are the things that we're constantly kind of struggling with always, and trying to figure out, okay, well, do we get to a point where at the end of the day we just sit there and complain about stuff, or are we going to actually do something? And I feel like a lot of people probably watching this is, yeah, well, I hear all this stuff all the time, but what can I do? And this is why I think for the first time, the things have shifted a little bit with crypto. And I think that's why it's so interesting. You've got guys that are creating DAOs, which is what I would just, what is a DAO? The terminology means distributed autonomous organization. But really what it is it's a liquid democracy. And, liquid democracies do have their faults, don't get me wrong. But it does give people the opportunity to say, hey, I want to put some money into this, but I also want to have a say of where it goes. And I think, we'll see. Are these things going to take off? Will they stay legal, or will there be regulation? I don't know. But I do think that it's interesting that at least we're innovating in a way to try to figure out what we can do as a society to make some kind of impact. And Dickie says he doesn't have time to learn everything. You know what? You're absolutely right. You don't have time to learn everything. I don't have time to learn everything. This is where that tool in the toolbox thing comes together, right? If we bring people together that all have different expertise, look, Pete tells me something I know he's an expert in. I'm not gonna question him. I'm gonna trust him. Because if I start trusting people that are experts in their fields, then together we move forward. My old mentor used to say all the time, he goes, a rising tide floats all boats. Well, you only have a rising tide when the water is at the same level all the time. And that's the kind of thing I think that we really need to focus on as we start thinking about how to make an impact.
Yeah. And a rising tide lifts all boats, but when the moon goes back into the next cycle, it drops all the boats down,
Yeah, and then you have a tailgate party.
Right. And then some guy's like, yeah, well, I'm going to sink your fucking boat because I don't like you, you know?
Yeah.
All right, so let's get back on task here. So when you guys go to a place like Necker Island,
Yeah.
right, there's that looks fun. I want to go. I want to help. I want to be part of the solution. But also, like, it seems awful elitist to go to this exclusive island that gets destroyed by a hurricane and rebuilt in record time to try to solve a problem in the ocean. I mean, you know, you get all that, and it's fair criticism to say, well, how did you guys get there? How much diesel did you spend? You know, blah 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 blah, on and on and on. Right? Instead of just going to a Buckhead hotel in Atlanta and meeting there, you know, it's not any different, but the perception is there. So does that ever bug you guys? Do you guys ever think about like what that looks like when you?
Yeah. Look, I think about it all the time, and I think also that, you know, context is key. You know, it is in a lot of times when we think about, you know, I mean, look, I mean, we could go to New York. There's this building called the United Nations. Yeah. They got a lot of people from a lot of different places, and we can sit there and we can talk about world issues. We can talk about ocean issues, right? But what I found over the years is that a lot of those individuals who are talking about ocean issues, they've never set foot in the ocean. They've never scuba dived. They've never free dove. They probably can't even swim. I don't know. But, you know, they're certainly not in the mix. Now, you mentioned going to Richard's Island and, you know, it could seem elitist. You're absolutely right. My mission, you know, every year we have these commitments of what we want to do. And I've been working really hard over the last few years to really get corporate America and others to realize how important it is that we have the conversation. And if I have sponsors from corporate America, you know, big companies that, you know, say that they want to do the right thing, well, this is an opportunity for them to put their money where their mouth is. And because there are individuals that are connected to us through Ultramarine around the world that are in places like Mumbai, there are places in Santiago, Chile, that are in the Galapagos, who are witnessing a lot of these things that are happening to the environment on a first person basis. Those are the individuals that over time, you know, we've often tried to bring to the conversation, because it's really important to get the people who are seeing it firsthand to talk about what they see and what they feel might work and might not work in their community. The other issue is that, you know, Necker is also a place of inspiration. It was something that I looked up to. I mean, a bunch of people were sitting on island years ago looking up at the stars and asking the question, would we ever get to go to space? And those are the individuals who created Virgin Galactic. And now there's a whole space program from a commercial standpoint that's all private sector of people going to space. The elders were created there. Nelson Mandela, Peter Gabriel, Jimmy Carter. They all came there. Desmond Tutu. They all came there with the intention of creating something much bigger than themselves. And when there's something much bigger than any of us, I can't think of anything larger than the ocean and the challenges that are presented with the oceans. And so if I was going to try to bring people together, and for that matter, I mean, look, I don't want to get into a barbecue fight with you here, but I live in Texas, and I think that we have the best barbecue, just so that you know. You know, I could get a mean barbecue going in my backyard. You know, I'm probably as nice as President Obama seems like he is. I probably will never get an invite to get him to come to my backyard and have a barbecue. I have a higher probability of him going to Richard's place on Necker. So the question is that, yeah, well, while from some standpoints, it might look like, you know, you've got this super elite group of people, but it's also the group of people who have the influence on the most amount of people on the planet. We've got 8 billion brothers and sisters on this planet. Now, I don't think that we're going to ask 8 billion people to do the right thing. If we wait for that, we're all dead, just so you know. But I do think that there could possibly be about 100,000 people that have influence on the 8 billion people that could say, hey, you know, there's another way to do things. And here's what I mean by that. If I go into Starbucks, why do you go into Starbucks? You go to Starbucks for the coffee. You never say, you know, I think I'm going to go to Starbucks today because I would like a plastic lined paper cup that's not recyclable. No one says that, right? So if I came to Starbucks and there was some other vehicle for me to get my caffeine in the morning, then I would be just as happy. So therefore, these individuals that are at the corporate level have influence over me and a lot of my other brothers and sisters that are on this planet, right? So if we really think about who we really need to get to flip the switch. It is those people at the very top that likely would not come to my backyard barbecue. And so that's exactly what we use Necker for. But, that doesn't mean that we don't meet throughout the year in different places. That one obviously just gets a lot of attention because of where it is. But I will say that, we've gotten a lot done in the time that we've been there. And I'm really excited about some of the things that are even coming out of this year's summit. So, I think that it needs to continue happening, and I need big, large companies to sponsor, because I want to get as many people from as many places around the world that are doing great things that couldn't even afford a plane ticket, much less, coming to spend a week on Necker. And that's what I use those funds for, is to get those voices so that this becomes as inclusive as possible.
And in your guys' defense, one, I want you to succeed. But two, when you go to the UN, when you go to Congress, when you go to Alibaba, and you're like, hey, here's my problem, it's the problem du jour, and they get the next guy after you and the next guy. And so it becomes mind-numbing, right? And so you have to find a way to do it. And if you can invite some of the Necker and that gets them there, oh my God, that's how all charities do. We're all trying to find that person who's willing to help.
I mean, the other side of this coin is like, if I'm doing it wrong and you don't like it, go do your own thing. Like, figure it out. Show me how to do it better. But right now, I think this is the best way that we could possibly think how to do it.
I agree. And then one of the other things I often say about charity is two things I say is, one is charity is not supposed to be easy. These kind of problems are not going to be easy. Otherwise, they'd be licked already, right? So you guys aren't a charity per se, but the problems that we're trying to solve, that you solve with charities, is because the government can't do it. It's got to be done by building a body of people, and it's not going to be easy to do it. The other thing is quit fucking reinventing the goddamn wheel. I'm into the ocean thing. Jeremy's into the ocean thing. So I'm going to try to find a way to help Jeremy. I'm going to keep bugging him. Like, how do I help? How do I help? What do I do? Have you on the show? All these things. So find someone that who's already got a rope and is already pulling on it, and go over and grab a piece of that rope and pull on him. Jesus Christ,
Yeah.
So
let's do it.
Yeah.
What are we waiting for? Hey, when are we doing a show, Pete? Oh, wait, we're on the show.
We're doing it. We're kind of doing it right now. Yeah.
Right.
Ultramarine, ocean.com. But also, let's talk about what you guys have accomplished by going to Necker. I've got your notes here with all the things that you guys are doing, the goals. Let's cover that stuff.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, there's a number of things I think that are really exciting. And one of them, a couple years ago, we brought the First Lady of Palau, Debbie Remengesau, to the island. And, the reason why we invited her, is that, their country, for those of you that don't know Palau is just east of the Philippines. It's a beautiful, beautiful country that has just an enormous amount of biodiversity. But they did something very strange. They said, you know what we're going to do? And, it's not like these island nations have a whole lot of choice of what their exports are. They said, we're going to protect 80% of our territorial waters. That sounds like suicide. Like, why would you do that? Well, they did that because they realized that too much was being taken and it didn't have a chance to replenish. And so they in order to kind of get the message out there, to really make a massive impact, they instituted something called the Palau Pledge. So everyone's familiar with going into a country, you pull your passport out, they stamp it, and then off you go. Well, this one's a little different. They stamp your passport, and then and it's a contract that says that you promise not to take anything that's not given to you. The only footprints you'll leave are the ones that will wash away. It's a very beautiful kind of like poem that the children of Palau wrote. You have to sign it in front of the immigration officer. If you don't enter the country. It is a mandatory visa requirement. This had, even though it was just a signature, it's just a very basic thing. We had, when I say we, I feel like I'm like part of the team now, but I didn't have anything to do with it. I'm just a huge fan. They went and they had this, they had videos as you landed. They just tell you the whole story. And it became such an impactful thing that the visitors that came to Palau became environmentalists, essentially. And they were protecting this place that they came to spend money to come on vacation. So we invited for First Lady Debbie Remengesau, because she was the founder, along with her co-founder, Laura Clark. They created this beautiful thing. And we said, let's introduce them to the BVI. How cool would it be to have a United Caribbean pledge at some point? But we have to get all the countries on board. So the first conversations had started with that. And now, as you probably are aware, something of this magnitude, even as simple as, I joked around with the government there, and I said, if you just give me a nice like uniform, I can just make a stamp and I'll just be the random guy stamping passports as they come in. I'll just make everybody say, you don't have to make it a law. And they're like, it doesn't really work like that, Jeremy. But this was the very beginning of a conversation that a lot of them felt that this could be something that could help them. It could help their environment because, again, it's the same issue. People are coming to these countries because they're on vacation. They want to see vibrant coral reefs. They want to see biodiversity. Well, the only way to do that is if we all play an active role at trying to protect it. And so that's really what that was. So that was one outcome that's currently in play there. I'm really excited about that one because I feel like it feels like a fairly simple one to implement.
Those small wins are the keys, though, right? And you start to find other areas where if we just did these simple things, these aren't gigantic budget things. These are like, can we just do this? And the Caribbean is really another. It's a big bathtub, and we had Sandra's boyfriend on, and he's trying to get a company off the ground where they process through pyrolysis old plastic into fuel. Yeah. And if you are in the right part of the Caribbean or the Mediterranean, there is a pocket that just draws all of that plastic out. It's everywhere, but it especially is in these other areas. Yeah. And so he's like, hey, there's a marketplace for this where you can just bring me old plastic and things that no longer have use. He's created value by turning them into fuel. Now, is that a perfect solution? No, of course not. But it does take something that you're just going to throw into a landfill and it's going to off gas, and we're getting one more step of life out of it. So it gets extracted as a petrochemical, processed into a plastic and whatever else. And then you're just even by extending the life and creating value is going to get some of that plastic out of the ocean. That's just a tiny, tiny win. And here's a viable little business that he's got going on. And maybe that grows and people start buying these plants and start. You sent one of those to Djibouti. There's so much plastic in Djibouti because they don't bag trash. They just throw it. And it's in one of those spots where it just collects. And so you could just go, you now have an exportable source of energy, It's there are problems out there you can't solve.
Yeah, I think paralysis is an interesting gap for where we're at in this particular time. I don't think that it's a solution for a number of reasons. One, because for many it absolves them of the responsibility of doing the right thing to begin with, and the guys who are making the plastic say, "Oh, you're just going to turn it into fuel in the end, so I'll just keep making more plastic." So it's not necessarily the best thing. There's a company that I think is doing something really innovative in this particular space. It's CRDC.global. And they actually started from beach cleanups. Like because this is the problem. So you go to a beach, it's filled with plastic, you put it all in a bunch of bins, and then what? You stick it in your car and you take it to the landfill. It just doesn't make sense. These guys came up with a strategy because even with pyrolysis and even with some of these other kinds of systems, you have to have certain types of resins. You can't use just any kind of plastics. That means you got to still sort. It's got to be clean. And then you're using lots of water. I mean, just the list goes on. What these guys did is they said, look, we'll take all resins, number 1 through 7, and it can be contaminated. It can be dirty. It doesn't matter. We're going to turn it into something called Resonate. Resonate is what they call it, which I think is a brilliant branding strategy. And what they do with this is they convert this into concrete. So what is interesting about this is that 40% of the emissions that are in the atmosphere now come from construction. And concrete is a big chunk of that 40%. If we can take plastic that is destined for the landfill or the ocean or wherever else, collect it, turn it into this Resonate, not only are we pumping less carbon into the atmosphere, but we're also creating a true end of life for this material. So I think structured concepts like that, and as we talk about a growing world with more construction, this seems to be like a viable solution. Versus kind of the paralysis. Also, we want to try to get away from fossil fuels because we're just burning more crap into the environment. We need to try to stop doing that as well. All of these to say that these can be short-term gaps that bring us to a much bigger destination. And I think again, a lot of people would say, "Oh, electric is going to be our silver bullet." There is no silver bullet. If we just went to electric, we'd have a bunch of huge problems there too. So, So a lot of this is going to be a lot of ebb and flow as we go. And so, while I'm not too keen on any one particular thing being like the thing, it is important to realize that at least we're starting to engineer our way out of this mess.
Yeah, and the Palau thing is just a thing, and then you're going to have the next thing, and next thing, next thing. And honestly, if we're going to be scientifically based, and I've stopped calling fossil fuels because it needs a rebranding. So I just call it organic fuel, because you pull it out of the ground and there it is. It's already created. But there's a pathway where that super energy dense product can become a lot of things. It's not going to go away. People in other areas, that's the best way to get them energy. I mean, Haitians are energy poor, and they're going to have some way to survive. So you're right. It has to be like a multiplicity of solutions. So you take the fossil fuels, you take some nuclear solutions, some wind, some solar, whatever comes next, whatever it is, and you can start to hopefully blend this stuff. I mean, the U.S. is less and less reliant on coal every year. So, we're kind of doing the right thing in that one little stream, but there are a lot of things being worked.
I mean, there's even a lot to be said for nuclear technologies because, the one thing that always people come back and say, oh, well, yeah, but what the nuclear waste? Interesting thing enough is that there's this thing called NDBs, which are these nuclear batteries that can actually power micro devices for, hundreds, if not thousands of years, right? Things that are impossible to constantly change batteries in the deep sea or in space or wherever. So,
right.
We've now gotten to a point where we've started to kind of engineer our way out of this problem, but we need to try not to get in our own way.
Come on. That's what our favorite thing is.
No, I mean, that's really the major issue is that we get in our own way with half truths. I mean, even the crypto conversation. I mean, how many times have you heard, oh, it's bad for the environment? Like the people that say that are probably not the engineers. They're probably somebody who ran with a story with a bunch of half truth. I mean, is it great for the environment? No. But is it getting better? 100% it's getting better. And, and then, you also have to ask questions like compared to what, I think that, perspective is really key in all of these things, even the plastic problem, the crypto energy usage issue. Always look at the perspective and compare it against something else that you're already using, and then decide for yourself which is the better, which is the worse.
The other thing, like something like electric vehicles are a great thing right now. They already are dramatically different than they were 10 years ago, but cradle to grave, what pollutes more? I don't know. I don't know that we can wrap our hands around that. Scratching down a mountain to get a bunch of lithium and our inability to recycle things, our desire to get a new phone every 18 months. I mean, these are things that,
look, it comes back down to engineering. I mean, look, our batteries suck. Does that mean that we continue using 70-year-old technology to forge forward with the electrical revolution? No. We look at solid state technologies. Like the guy who actually invented the lithium battery, his name is John B. Goodenough, which is ironic. Sorry, John, if you're watching this, but your battery technology is just good enough. But to his credit, he's actually creating a conductive electrolyte solution that's a ceramic that allows you to have a solid state battery. And there's other guys like the guys at Standard Graphene in South Korea who are actually using silicon batteries that are wrapped in graphene to keep the silicon from expanding. These are all battery technologies that are far better than what we use today. The problem is that they're not at a point where we can mass produce them yet. Right. But if we stop using electric systems, then there's going to be no incentive to create these batteries. So it's a double-edged sword.
Yeah, it is a double-edged sword. And as soon as you think you've got your hands wrapped around something, some unknown dragon pops up, and you're like, "Damn it, I didn't think about it." Right. Let's talk a little bit more
as they say in Texas, man plans, God laughs.
Yeah, that's true. And you guys do have some good barbecue, by the way. I want to just cover a little more what you guys are accomplishing out there at Necker, because the Palau thing is incredible. What else you guys do? Because that's not the only thing you guys get done.
No, so we also started working on a component we call Generation C. That was a way to unite the youth around the world for 30 by 30. Now, 30 by 30 is the 30% of the ocean protected by the year 2030. The reason why is all the scientists around the world. They come and said, look, if we allowed this amount of space to be protected, very specific spaces, by the way, then that would begin the regeneration process of the oceans. And so instead of having, I don't know, 40 years worth of food left, we'd have maybe 400 years. I don't know what the actual number is, but we'd have more than what we have now. And so the real issue was that we were leaving the youth out of this process. And generally speaking, it's a bunch of talking heads saying what the issues are and falling short on the actions. And so there were a number of youth around the world that we were connected to that were interested in this. And we started to create something. And we've been working really closely with the Global Ad Agency, VMLY&R. I'm very grateful to the work that they've shown us. I mean, sometimes, the four of us that started this, which was Danny Washington, myself, Laura Clark, and Philippe Cousteau, we kind of feel like, presidents of a country, because VMLY&R comes back and they're like, here are all the things that we could do. And they just have these decks, and it's amazing, amazing thing. So I think it's a really interesting component, but this is something that hasn't launched yet. We're about to launch it. And it's really important for us to kind of, get people together, and really focus on what can be done, what tangible steps, what campaigns that can come out of this. Because I'm not, at the end of the day, I'm not real excited about going and making a bunch of noise and then showing up the next day and getting my latte like nothing's changed. Like we really need to, if we're going to make some noise, let's make some noise and hit tangible tasks that we can tick the box and say that we've got them done. Because by the time that 2030 is here, I want to see that not 2.7% of the ocean is protected. I want to see 30% protected, because that's where we're at right now. 2.7 is highly protected, of which all the different protection levels, but 8% of the ocean is protected, but 2.7 is really truly protected.
So we got ways to go.
We got a long ways to go. I remember when they were saying we got to protect 20% by 2020, and then like, okay, well, let's do 30 by 30. Like, this is what happens when you don't have direction, and that's one of the things that's coming out of this group that this team has put together, and I'm really impressed with the concepts they've come up so far. I can't wait to share what they've been working on, but a lot of it's still kind of under wraps.
It seems like you have too far to go in the time that you have to get to 30, right? That'll just be the
yes and no. So there's some areas, like if you look at only.1/Antarctica, there's a massive chunk of water around Antarctica that would really help that figure. And I think that has almost 300,000 signatures at the moment. There needs to be 300 million signatures or more. But really what this is trying to do is this is trying to get, individuals to realize in China and in Russia, because Antarctica is multi-stakeholder, multi-country, but getting at least China or Russia to realize the value of the protection of those waters and how important they are for the rest of us here on the planet. And I feel like Russia could be a huge hero in that scenario. So could China. Just one of them saying, yeah, you know what? We should protect this massive area of the ocean. We're going to do something for humanity. That would be the biggest superhero thing that they could do. Will they do it? I don't know, but I have high hopes.
And quite honestly, we don't have leadership in general. I don't mean we as the U.S. As a globe, we don't want to say yes to something, and also we like to attach too many things to these great ideas. So there's like, you're saying yes to something you don't want to say yes to, instead of like, can we all in this room agree that we're going to protect the water around Antarctica, and that room could be the UN or whatever. Right. But we're just not willing to do that. Yeah. Everybody wants something for that greater good. Like, just knock it off. Just say yes to the greater good.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And I think that, it goes back to that, like, why would you care? Like, what am I going to get out of it? If I get my country to protect Antarctica, like, and sometimes the impact is so big when you're such a small component of that. It's like, I'm going to go drink a margarita instead.
Which is a viable thing to do. I like margarita.
That sounds good to me right now.
Okay, so we got a couple minutes left. I don't want to take all your time. It's always great, but I want to have you back as well. What do you want to cover in the last couple minutes here?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would love to hear from the community, honestly, and I'd love to hear what they're most worried about. I mean, I feel like sometimes we end up in these echo chambers of people who are talking about all the things that need to happen. I mean, we do a real good job listening to scientists, but then there's individuals, everyday people who walk up to the water and they like, what's going on here? Why is this a mess? I mean, that's how I got started. I got started in all this because I was photographing my models underwater and, making these, art pieces. And then I was just constantly being bombarded with plastic caps or plastic bottles or plastic nets and thinking to myself, like, someone should fix this, not realizing that I could be that person. So, I would love to learn, of your viewers who has a superpower. Like, what do they do? Your superpower, you're using yours. And how do we come together and build a community? I created a portal for Ultramarine where people could come and talk about some of these things. I could bring some of the leaders, some of the thought leaders, and say, hey, did you know about munitions? Did you know about deep sea mining? Did you know about this? Here's the threats. Here's here's why we think it. Some people think it's a good idea. Here's why we think it's a bad idea. What are your thoughts? I really would love to try to figure out ways to kind of incorporate folks who feel like they're just listening to guys like us talk about this stuff all the time and they don't really have a chance to say anything. I want to find ways to kind of incorporate other voices as well. So I don't know, how do you continue that as a topic and on a show like this, but it's something that keeps me up at night because I feel like not enough people are talking.
Well, that's one of my favorite questions to ask is what keeps you up at night. And you're, I'm trying to solve a really big problem. It's easy to push it off. One of the other things that I wanted to bring up, and I know we're running out of time, but I've been fascinated by it. I've always been fascinated by it, but especially lately when people talk about getting the stakeholders in the room. And the thing that I know is that when you only have the stakeholders, you have no fucking idea what shaped tent you're putting up. So like my buddy Phil's an ALS patient, and he'll go to these legit people that want to help solve the ALS problem, and they run these legit medical organizations. And they have all these assumptions and they have all these scientists, they have all these consultancies, but that's not how it works when you have ALS. And they're dumbstruck by his candor and by his instant, revealing, oh, we've done this all wrong. Right. You started without the very people you're trying to help. And so your call to action with hey, let's do this. Let's get together. Yeah. Let's tell these stories. Let's do it. Pete, breakitdownshow.com, super easy. Email me. I'll get you connected with Jeremy, have you on the show, whatever it is.
Or I've even got a form here. I'm just going to send this to you, Pete. But it's ocn.ai/summit. It's just a form. If you want to be part of the Ultramarine community, just say you saw me on the show, on the Break It Down show. And normally there's a paywall because obviously we've got to find a way to keep the lights on. But if you come in through Break It Down show, I'll comp you in. That way you can just be part of the network. But what I really want, if I comp you in, I want you to be a participatory individual that says, yeah, I'm willing to help out any way I can. Here are the things that I'm really good at. And I think, if we do that, we all start looking at each other like my dad used to say, we're all tools in a toolbox. We're going to find that maybe instead of having a saw, somebody's out there that joins up is a power saw, and we're going to get the job done a lot faster. So, I really just want to find a way to kind of build community. That would be probably the biggest thing that's on my task list, because I feel like, I've already said it, but I don't think that enough people are standing up, and they're not standing up because they're afraid that, they're just going to make a bunch of noise and not a lot of action is going to happen.
Yeah.
What did Elvis Presley say? A little more action, please. That's what I'm looking for. A little less conversation.
Yeah, a little less conversation, a little more action. And then he's always taking care of business, just like Jeremy McKane is. Yeah. All right, stand by 1 sec while I wrap this thing up here. We'll roll the video and then we'll chat afterwards. Hey, thanks for watching the show. I really appreciate it. Right here, you can subscribe. Please do that. It makes the show grow. Hit that notification bell so you know which incredible guest is coming up next. Down below is the PayPal link. You can put a small subscription in. That is an enormous help. All that money goes right back into the show. And then right up over here are the next episodes you should listen to, curated by yours truly. Thank you so much.